So we're going to get a lot of different perspectives, like Alli put it, the CPG space, the consumer product goods, more the business angle, more of the herbalist angle, many different facets and lenses to adaptogens. So
this is Adaptogens 101, and we presume everybody here just wants to know the basics, the fundamentals. So why don't we start with a definition? And like, if you look it up on Google, you're going to get one thing, but each of us have our own perspectives on that. So what is an adaptogen to mushroom revival?
Adaptogens are herbs or mushrooms that have a supportive effect on our body, specifically around occasional stress and fatigue. And that's the number one aspect. Danielle, do you want to give your opinion from putting on your herbalist hat of what is an adaptogen?
Yeah, the way that I like to think of it is we basically categorize different, whether that's herbs or mushrooms, based on their action in the body, right? So we have these groupings. There's different plants that will be supportive to, getting us to sleep at night. So we have this whole range of sedatives to hypnotics, these like really relaxing herbs. We have groups of herbs that support our digestive system, our carminatives and warming herbs. And so adaptogens are another kind of umbrella category like this. And within the category, we have, as Alex mentioned, we have both plants and fungi. And there's a couple different criteria, and these plants and mushrooms have been used by humans far before we had a definition. So the definition is changing, but there's a couple key things that really make adaptogens, while there's other plants that might have some similarities, but to be a true adaptogen, the first and foremost thing is it has to be non-toxic, right? So these are substances that are used without this strong threshold. Even some of our basic herbs like garlic can be toxic, right? It can actually kill tissues at too high of a dose. So adaptogens are non-toxic. They don't have that kind of threshold of like, oh God, I took too much and now we have this detrimental effect. The other thing, and Alex mentioned this, is they're normalizing, they're balancing, right? They're bringing our bodies into a state of homeostasis, and they can do this on multiple different levels, right? Primarily, we see this happening on the immune system and our nervous system, but this can also be happening on, normalizing the function of our detoxification process, our liver health, on our gut health, on cardiovascular health. So they can be normalizing in different ways, right? They're all different, unique species. And then this third piece, which is so cool about adaptogens, is that they're non-specific. And so I think of this like cruise control or like a gas brake system, right? So they have this ability to either be stimulating or suppressing, right? Like moving our bodies in one direction or another based on the body that's ingesting them. And this is like, at Sigmatic, we call it everyday magic. It's so cool. We can take one adaptogen and it has this balance of phytochemicals, some that can be more stimulating, some that can be more relaxing. And based on how you're approaching that species, your body's going to react accordingly, right? So those are, I guess, Spark Notes definition. We can get deeper into each and any one of those.
Yeah, and then, the color that I'll add to that is a beautiful definition, Danielle. When I first kind of encountered adaptogens and as I kind of touched on in my introduction, like very much coming at this from the mushroom space, not all mushrooms are adaptogens and vice versa. I think that's a really misunderstood concept, which Danielle, I think, articulated really beautifully. But when I think adaptogens, when people ask me about them, I really have like a one-word answer, and I just think homeostasis. And when I first started to incorporate adaptogens into my life, it was because I wanted to bring my body into homeostasis because I did feel out of whack. And I got introduced to this space through ashwagandha, or ashwagandha, as my mom calls it. And that was kind of like my intro. And then it just opened up this whole other world from there. I know we'll dive into specific adaptogens in a second, so I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But, like Alex and Lyra mentioned, it helps me deal with occasional stress. I'm more of a high energy person. So rather than using adaptogens to bring my body up, it's more to bring myself down. And they can be used for a variety of different things. So it's more about really what I don't feel rather than what I do. And I think that's also something really important to note, because a lot of people, when they take anything, whether it's a pill, a supplement, a powder, they expect a reaction. And what I really pay attention to is, what am I not feeling today? And that tends to be the good stuff of like, I'm not feeling, as highly stressed as I normally would have, and like my adrenals don't feel like they're firing. So that's something important that I know when I'm checking in.
And just to give a history of, my perspective of why I think some herbs and mushrooms have these adaptogenic qualities is just how crazy the environments that they live in, right? So a lot of adaptogens live in these super extreme environments, and fungi across the board are extremophiles, right? And they survive in the craziest places ever. So the oldest fungi was found probably 1 billion years ago, right? They don't know the exact date, but around 1 billion years ago. The oldest mushroom was around 800 million years ago. And throughout time, they've lived in really harsh environments. And their ability to adapt, I think, comes in some of the compounds that they produce. So, a lot of the compounds that we know and some people love, like psilocybin, was introduced as a defense mechanism, right? So a lot of these compounds were produced by plants and fungi as a defense mechanism to adapt to their environment. And so we can see fungi living in really crazy environments. Like a few years ago, I was reading this article about 69 different types of fungi being found underneath the Pacific Ocean, right? And not only were they found, but spores were viable after 20 million years in hibernation. And they were able to not only produce mycelium, or the roots of mushrooms, but actually mushrooms themselves, right? They've been found in Chernobyl, not only living, but thriving in this radioactive environment. They've been found, on the noses of rocket ships re-entering the atmosphere. Pieces of lichen, which is a symbiotic relationship between fungi and this photosynthetic counterpart, have been thrown out of space stations for 6 months in the vacuum of space, then brought back on board and continue growing like nothing happened, right? So vacuum of space, Chernobyl, underneath the ocean. And then a lot of the adaptogens that people use, like cordyceps, for example, a lot of people in the United States and Americas use Cordyceps militaris, but a cousin is Ophiocordyceps senescens, which grows on caterpillars, right? So it has to take over an insect and use all its chemical warfare and to take over an insect, and then grow at like 15,000 feet above sea level. So really, really insane environments, and it's almost the same altitude as like rhodiola that grows in Siberia, about 10,000 feet above sea level, and chaga growing in really harsh, cold environments in Siberia as well. So we see this time and time again, and it just goes to kind of this concept in herbalism, doctrine of signatures, where we can tell a lot about the benefits, the supportive qualities of plants and mushrooms from the shape, the colors, the environment, like how the plant or mushroom is growing, and what it can do to support our human body. So I just wanted to give that plug as a mycologist hat of how cool mushrooms are, and herbs and adaptogens of the environments that they can thrive in. And it really goes to show, when we form this sacred relationship with them, how cool is it that we can also, have this adaptogenic qualities in our life.
Yeah, I love that so much. And that relation to the doctrine of signatures, we hear it all the time, like a walnut's good for your brain, or like, you know, eat figs for male reproduction, or whatever it is, right? These like lookalikes. But I really think that the definition should be expanded to understanding whether it's a fungi or plant is growing in its natural habitat, because even beyond the fungi, there aren't the plants that are adaptogens. There's really like 15, this number is argued, but like true plant adaptogens. And each one of them is so impressive with what it can withstand every day. I've just been doing a lot of writing and researching about maca, and maca, Lepidium mayanae, is the highest altitude food crop in the world, between 10,000 and 15,000 feet. It is thriving in the Peruvian Andes, and each one, they have to develop this really complex range of phytochemicals, right? So they are some of the most complex foods, species on the planet, because of what they're constantly like needing to adapt to in their own worlds, right? So it's like extreme temperatures, extreme winds, altitude, like you name it, on a daily basis. And so we think about that resilience, right? I think about like, cordyceps thriving up in the Himalayas, or like maca on those mountaintops. And it's like this sturdy, strong, resilient being, despite all this crazy chaos going on around it. And like, if there's anything that we truly need so desperately in the current state of the world, it's that energy, right? It's that sense of like, I can persevere, I can keep going with grace, with strength, and with the vitality to handle whatever else is thrown my way. And adaptogens are nature's example of doing that, right? And they've been doing that for thousands of years, and they're more accessible than ever before. And we can talk about that as well. But, you look at the history of these adaptogens, and it's like you had to either be in the royal class, or you had to trade for thousands of miles, your one cacao bean for that little bit of the maca root. And there's these grandiose stories because of how powerful and revered they are. And I just think, like, how blessed are we today that we have access to this? And it's just this gap between remembering and knowing what they're capable of supporting our bodies with, and then actually using them. But it's like, we can go to our typical grocery store and often, find a lot of these ingredients. So what a cool time to be living in.
Yeah. And then, the only thing I think that I'll add to that, which is really interesting, it's a little bit of a snowball from what everyone was just talking about, but we're so disconnected, right? Like, most of us interact with these products in Whole Foods, and we go to a store, it's on a shelf. In a very similar realm, a lot of us go to a restaurant, we eat a plate of food, and like so much had to happen for that to get there. And what's so fascinating and so important about what Mushroom Revival is doing and for Sigmatic, and what we're excited to be doing with the Multiverse, is like education around getting people back to human and understanding the wisdom of, these adaptogens and these herbs and these mushrooms specifically in our case. And I was a few months ago doing a lot of research on specifically the life lessons that we can learn from mushrooms. So I'm not going to go too woo-woo with this example, but I think it's important and really cool. There's so much wisdom in the mycelium network, and why it's so cool what Danielle and Lara and Alex were talking about understanding the environment that these, that all of these organisms are created in. Is there's so much that we can learn from how they operate, like how the mycelium network operates underground. It's fascinating. They connect, all life on Earth. It's all over the planet. And if we were to mirror a lot of the actions of these adaptogens and mushrooms and fungi underground, above ground, it would be like a way better world. It would be a much better world. Everyone would be much happier, much more collaborative. And, really to bring it full circle of what Alex was mentioning right at the beginning of this call is, so much of how we operate as humans is in a competitive environment, and why we're excited to kind of all be banding together, if you will, to do differently by the mushroom space than you saw happen with CBD or cannabis or, you know, anything previously, is like, I think it's really important to think about how we're operating like the mycelium network and how we can all support each other to get the wisdom of mushrooms to the humans, so to speak. And there's so much with that. I won't like dive too deep into the other lessons, but I mean, if you're to look into how mushrooms operate, how they can eat toxins out of the air, reverse environmental damage. Some mushrooms can even create their own wind. It's really fascinating. And I think there's a lot to be learned, and really why I think it's so important that everyone just touched on, you know, really getting more connected to the natural environment and understanding where this comes from. And one of the things we'll be doing, which is really cool, which I want Alex and Lyra and Danielle all involved in, is we're going to be doing like an immersive experience out here in Venice over the summer, where we're going to be, you know, bringing in the mushrooms, and some of those being adaptogens, and showing people, okay, like this is it in its raw form, and this is how it gets into your product. You know, because a lot of people, they'll take a tincture and have no idea what cordyceps is, you know, or like a lot of people, then when they see the actual photo of how cordyceps grows, they're like, ew, that's disgusting, you know, but there's so much of a gap there. So I just think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a great reminder to know that the organisms we're consuming were once alive and they have their own immune systems. And it's so poetic and beautiful that the physiology within their own existence can translate into our bodies, from plant to animal. Like, how intimate and cool is that? So why don't we start with like sort of categorizing adaptogens within this umbrella term?
So functional mushrooms, we'll just say a lot of our functional mushrooms are kind of hitting that adaptogen quality, but definitely not all mushrooms. So, you know, when we say functional, again, Alex and I probably have a different, and Alli have a different number that we say. I think there's around like 600-700 functional species. But yeah, within that, there's really a few that are like promising adaptogens. And again, they have to hit this threshold to really be true adaptogens. But again, adaptogens is just a word that we put to categorize how to best use these in our body. So I just want to mention, like, we have these definitions, and I'm really like, definitions drive me crazy. I'm like, as a herbalist, I have so many people come into my practice and they're like, I have X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, you don't have those things. Like, there's no, you know, maybe it's like, I worked with autoimmune conditions and chronic illnesses. So there was all sorts of labels kind of, you know, tagged on. And I think as a culture, we're so prone to like hold on really tightly to labels and be like, I have Lyme disease, I have Crohn's disease. And it becomes, we repeat that story, you know, over and over again. And it's like, I would just encourage us all to remove, you know, what we think we have, or what these kind of like, names are, and then just look at like how, either, you know, from your own body, what symptoms you're experiencing, and then how those symptoms shift when we engage with another whole synergistic being, right? That could be like me and Alli having a chat, like I'm a whole being, she's a whole being. But same when we work with the mushrooms or the plants, they are entire beings, right? That, like Lyra mentioned, these were once alive. So we have this interaction with them, and there's so much beauty that unfolds from that. So yeah, I mean, off topic, but I guess, you know, we could categorize, but like, take that as a grain of salt, because new information and new research is constantly coming out, and we're finding like, wow, one body is responding to that mushroom or that adaptogen in a way that we never had documented before. And so we continue to evolve, and that's, I think, why we're so interested in this world, probably all of us here, is because there isn't an ending. It's not like, okay, cool, these are the like 21 adaptogens, this is what they do. It's like, there's so much mystery, right? And even when you look at every species and like every single batch, or every like flush of a mushroom, or, you know, every harvest of a plant is going to be slightly different, right? So depending on the time of year that you pick it, depending on that season, like We talk about this a lot at Four Sigmatic. We use a lot of coffee as more of a common example. People are like, I want to know exactly how much caffeine is in this or exactly what compounds. And it's like, that's going to change every year. Like there was more rainfall in Colombia this year than last year. So the caffeine content, they're like, what? And so just like keeping that open mind and knowing that we're working with whole beings and that we are going to respond uniquely, and yet we can have kind of like pillars or foundations to help us ground and have an idea of how they're going to affect our bodies, right? So there's things that can shift, but like we know that, in lion's mane, for example, we know what the uracinones and uranacines do, and those are probably not changing, right? There's like this main function where we see this interaction in the body. Yeah, I'm like going down all these different rabbit holes. Like, what was the first question?
And that's I love that transition to compounds and like what is going on behind the scenes of the mushroom, right? Or the herb, and what I know a lot of people are they want to go as far away from woo woo as possible, and they're like, okay, give me the chemistry, right? And so one compound or class of compounds in particular that link pretty much every functional mushroom I know of are these class of compounds, these polysaccharides called 1,3,1,6 beta glucans. And there's specific types of the linkages of those beta glucans are different than the beta glucans in grain or cereal grains, things like that, which are the 1,3,1,4, which you see a lot in plants, right? But the ones in mushrooms, the particular 1,3,1,6, there's tons of research that show it has this incredible supportive quality on our immune system. And it's incredibly supportive for our overall immune health. And that has a huge component to its adaptogenic qualities, right? Is that 1,3,1,6 beta glucans that see in a lot of, if not all functional mushrooms, right, are those 1,3,1,6 beta glucans. But mushroom to mushroom, Danielle talked about the hericenones and the uracinones and other, non-polar compounds in lion's mane. Then for cordyceps, it's cordycepin, it's adenosine, adenine, uridine, like all these different non-polar compounds. And then reishi, for example, has its triterpenes, its ganiduric acids, and so each mushroom is different in its way that it is adaptogenic, and that's what makes it so fun, is that they're overall put in this umbrella of adaptogens, but they all have their little supportive benefits, right? Reishi for supporting a sense of calm, cordyceps for energy in athletes, chaga for immune supporting benefits, but they all have this adaptogenic qualities one way or another. So that's really important, that we look as an industry, like Alli was saying, of what's actually in this, right? Like how do these things grow, and to look deeper at, okay, these are mushrooms that I'm consuming, and they're not just in a bottle, right? They're on the land. They're interacting with our ecosystems, and they have molecules in them, and they have these amazing life cycles. And the more that we can understand them, I think we'll get a fuller picture of our own health, right? And how we interact with the rest of the world. And we can take on these lessons into our everyday life, right? So it's not just a pill anymore. It's not just a cup of coffee anymore. It's a lifestyle. It's an understanding. It's a philosophy, which I think is cool. All life is connected, and it's all symbiotic. So it's exciting. I'm geeking out about mushrooms and herbs. And thanks for everyone for joining. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, I think it's such a good point. And I'm actually curious. I'm gonna flip the script, and I have a question for Alex and Lyra on this topic. so much of what Danielle just shared, so important, understood by very, very few people that aren't deep in the weeds of this space, right? And Danielle has been studying this for years, as have you both. And people on this Zoom might have like a basic understanding of mushrooms and adaptogens and all that stuff. All that being said, you go to the store, right, to get your daily dose of adaptogens or mushrooms. You pick up a bottle and maybe it says reishi or lion's mane or ashwagandha on it. It's so interesting because there's very little guidelines around and education for people to understand, like, just because something lists that ingredient on the product does not mean it's a good product or even has the right amount of that adaptogen or mushroom to make it considered a viable, effective product. And that's so much of the work that we're doing at the Multiverse, because we wanted to create like a better set of standards with, a mushroom specific marketplace. All the products on our marketplace have mushrooms as the primary or secondary ingredient, but we look for that. Number one, we look for health standards, and then we look for specific criteria around how much of the mushroom are you using, what part of the mushroom are you using, how transparent is the company and how they're sourcing the mushroom, where are they getting them from, because you could list reishi and market yourself as a mushroom product, but be putting 5 milligrams of, a reishi in a product, and that's like putting a sprinkle of salt on your food and saying it's salted. It's completely ineffective in that point. I'm just curious from, Danielle and then Alex and Lyra as well, like, what do you guys look for and how do you explain to the average customer that's just trying to incorporate these into their lives? What do they look for when they pick up a product, or, just in general when they're looking for these?
Okay, there's so much here. Let's break it down first and talk about kind of the preparation, what to look for, and then the dosing, because they'll lead into each other, but just to try to simplify as much as we can. Luckily, I think all three of us are really on the same page when it comes to this, but for me as an herbalist, I really feel passionately about preserving in the way that it's been used for thousands of years. So, we can look at any one of our adaptogens, and there's a several thousand-year tradition of them being used across the world, even in North America, but those traditions are kind of lost, but we're bringing it back, don't worry, with conversations like this. And so when we look at, let's talk about mushrooms first, but this is relevant with the plants too. The big piece is, what part of the mushroom are you actually getting? So in nature, with all of our ancestors and all these thousands of years, the part of the species that was accessible to the human eye to be able to go out and forage was what we refer to as the fruiting body, right? It's just like the apple in the tree. And so it's the part of the species that's on the side of tree above ground. It's like what most of us probably think of when we hear the word mushroom, right? But there's actually several different parts of fungi. Really, when it comes to the marketplace, we're seeing three different parts sold. So we're seeing the mycelium. That's a majority of new products coming out on the market, which is essentially, this is like so bastardized. I hope I can say that here, but like we could have a whole hour, several hour long chat about mycelium, but think of it like the mushroom root system. Think of it like that underground interconnected network web, whether it's inside of a tree or under the soil. Second part, the real mushroom, right? The part that fruits. And then the third being the spores, essentially mushroom seeds. They're so much cooler than that, but the spores. And so you can either find in a product mycelium, fruiting body, or spores. And the tradition, the several thousand-year tradition, has always been on the fruiting body. So that mushroom itself, the real mushroom. And so I'm very passionate about this being the part that we continue to use. I think there's amazing potential for our ecosystem and different environmental benefits of different parts, of using mycelium for biomaterials. And, Nike just came out with a shoe using mycelium leather. Like, there's all this incredible stuff going on. But when it comes to our bodies when it comes to the functionality for our health. I'm a huge proponent of carrying on the tradition and using the true fruiting body. So that's the like one big thing. The second piece is really knowing where your mushrooms are coming from, what they're growing on. Mushrooms are bioaccumulators, which means they absorb a lot from the environment that they're growing on. So organic is so important. Really, third-party testing is even more important because mushrooms can accumulate into that fruiting body things like heavy metals and irradiation and pesticides and molds and yeast and mycotoxins, and the list goes on. So that cleanliness is key. And ideally, we're sourcing our functional mushrooms from the substrate. Basically, we're growing them on a substance that's mimicking what they grow on out in the wild. And the majority of our functional mushrooms grow on woods. They grow on logs. Cordyceps is our example, which we can talk about. So using a substrate that is that same, like a wood substrate, is really important, right? It's like we are what we eat. The mushrooms are what they eat. And third and finally is extraction. Extraction is so critical to ensure that all of those amazing compounds that Alex was bringing up, you know, all of those beta glucans that support our immune system and our gut health, unless the mushroom has been extracted, our bodies can't actually use those incredible constituents. And so I'm seeing words all the time like micronized and you know, raw, fermented, like all these other things. And really the gold standard is the word extraction. So make sure it says extracted on your product. There's a couple different ways to extract. We can get into that. Different extraction methods pull out different benefits, different compounds from the mushroom, but extraction is key. So spark notes, the real mushroom or fruiting body, you know, sourcing from a wood substrate that's organic and third-party tested, and then ensuring that that species has been extracted.
I love what you just said, and just to go off of that for a little bit. I mean, the fruiting bodies, we all agree that that's what we should use, and you know, looking at the science of that, it's pretty night and day. So, I mean, just talking about the 1316 beta glucans, we did a study with Bastyr University for a couple of years, where a friend Reishi Strauss spearheaded it, and we found, I'm sorry, that was with cordycepin and adenosine, and we found that the cordycepin in the fruiting bodies was 56 times more potent in the fruiting bodies as compared to the mycelium on grain, and 17 times more adenosine in the fruiting bodies compared to the mycelium on grain. We did another mini study with Megazyme over in Ireland, who created the Megazyme test for the 1316 beta glucans. We found that our cordyceps mushrooms have 400 times more 13 times, not percent, times more 1316 beta glucans. And that's just our test, right? You can look up decades and decades, dozens and dozens of different scientific articles that show the same exact results. I haven't found one single paper that shows the opposite. It is pretty night and day. And we have thousands of years of historic traditional results for that. The testing, the certifications is so important, as Danielle said, and also, you know, the extraction. So, you know, the 1316 beta glucans are great, but we also have these, you know, these non-polar compounds, these triterpenes from reishi, the cordycepin from cordyceps, those sort of things that can only be extracted with solvents that are good at extracting those. Like alcohol is a great solvent for those compounds. So not only making sure it's extracted, period, but it's dual extracted, right? And just to go back to the mycelium, you know, some companies will, as Danielle said, will use these really sneaky phrases like fermented, right? And it sounds amazing. Like fermented anything is great. And I'm like, and they'll use it, they'll sneak it in. And so the customers are like, oh, that sounds awesome. Another one is full spectrum, right? And so anyone who has any familiarity with CBD or cannabis is like, full spectrum is what you want, right? But in the mushroom industry, it's this really sneaky phrase that these companies slip in where they say, oh, we have the mycelium and the fruiting bodies. There's no fruiting bodies in there. The best there is are primordia, which are just tiny, almost microscopic little bumps, right? And I've toured so many of these farms, these companies, and I've seen it firsthand. And I literally needed a magnifying glass to see it. And they're not mushrooms. They are not even close to mushrooms. It's really just marketing speak. And so it's really important. It's unfortunate that, you know, a lot of these companies in this space make it confusing for you guys. Like, and we're having to break our back trying to simplify it. But it is confusing. It's a wild, wild west out there, as someone put it in the comments. And not that mycelium is bad. It's just, you know, has a lot less functional compounds in them. And so, you know, if you're looking for a supplement for your health, pick fruiting bodies. And, you know, if you're looking for shoes from Adidas, then mycelium, like all day. That's great. And there's amazing mycelial technologies that are happening that are transforming our world. So mycelium is awesome, just maybe not in the nutraceutical space, or it should be very cheap, right? Or it should be a lot less expensive. And dose, you know, I've heard a lot of people, that's the other component. A lot of people say gram a day, right? And some people say other things. Dose is
arbitrary at best, at least according to other literature. So I don't know. I usually just encourage people to feel it out. You know, I mean, a gram is a nice parameter, but you want to make sure you're getting a gram of mushrooms, right? So look at the serving size and then look at the ingredients, because 2 grams of one product is probably going to be 1.9 grams of oats and 0.1 gram of reishi mycelium versus another product where maybe the serving size or the gram is way less, but it's 100% mushrooms and extracted at that. So it's even more than just like 1 gram of reishi. It's maybe 8 grams of reishi worth of constituents in a single serving. And we know it's confusing, and we're sorry on behalf of the industry, but I hope that conversations like this can just help develop the proficiency. And I think, Dane, you brought up a great question. What lessons can be learned from the nutraceutical cannabis industry? Well, guess what? How do people shop for cannabis? It's based on the milligram, right? You don't just buy stuff because it has a hemp leaf on it. You want to make sure you're getting a certain type, like, you know, sativa, indica, and then you look for a parameter of CBD, THC, whatever the compound is, because you know that different compounds have different actions. And I really think that's what we'll see in the mushroom industry. We've kind of wanted to pioneer that at Mushroom Revival by testing for cordycepin levels and publishing those results so people can start shopping how much cordycepin do I get in this product, not just like, is there mushrooms in this product? And that is also a hurdle. Like, we have broken our back trying to find a lab that could test for erinacines and hericenones that we trusted. We had to go to Malaysia, y'all. We're talking to someone in Malaysia to work on this. It was that inaccessible in the United States. The one lab that we did find had a ton of FDA warnings. So it's so nascent right now that we are literally just having conversations with labs. I think the more like that this industry blows up and that people make products, the demand will rise. And as soon as one person does it, then probably a lot of other people will do it, just like with cannabis. So keep your eyes peeled. You know, we constantly look at the cannabis industry for inspiration. That's all I'll say on that. Thank you, Jordan, for sharing some of the resources on this. Make sure to click those links. That's going to show you our podcast with these people and then our test results, all that good stuff.
and Four Sigmatic has been paving the way for many, many years, and has been one of the forefronters for high quality functional mushroom products in the US for a while now. So thank you, Danielle, and your whole team, and Alli, just, making the Mycoverse to really make these standards. I mean, that's super important. And, I said, sometimes it feels like we're in an echo chamber, but conversations like this and getting more people on board, there's a lot of dissonance to cut through and a lot of noise, and especially untrue facts by a lot of myco influencers out there who unfortunately just say sometimes untrue things. And so we just have to have more conversations like this. So thank you everyone for being curious and pursuing education around adaptogens, about herbs, about mushrooms, and having these conversations, because that's what pushes the industry forward. That's what pushes consumers forward, and pushes, supporting our best health. So thank you. Pat yourself on the back. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that just to add like a few more points to I think it was Jordan's question about comparison to the cannabis industry. We talk about this all the time. Like, this is actually my main kind of topic of conversation. I think there's like two really important things here. One, there's a lot of parallels, like CBD to functional mushrooms, and then cannabis to psilocybin. There's a lot of parallels in the path to legalization with psilocybin and cannabis. A lot of lessons to be learned, and actually, hopefully, the psilocybin space will move much quicker because of those lessons. And a lot of the same lawyers are working on the space and can learn from the mistakes and the mishaps. That being said, what you can see with CBD is really interesting, right? So, like, you had CBD is incredible. A few of my really good friends own CBD companies. They do it in the right way. They have high quality products, sourced in the correct way, ethically, and have incredible products. The issue is you had this massive trend, and then you had people see this trend, as we do in America, and hundreds of companies get into the space, create really shitty products, and then people then interact with CBD with those shitty products. They don't work, and then people come back and say CBD is BS, and it doesn't work. We're seeing that already in the mushroom space, and we're seeing, when we first started the Multiverse, we thought maybe there's like 60, 70 brands out there. We've had touch points with like 200. There's new brands being started every single day, many of which by people who don't even understand the difference between fruiting body and mycelium, or what the minimum effective dose is, or anything along these lines, because they're not mushroom people, they're brand people. Both are needed, right? You need incredible brand, and you need really high quality product to scale. So I think there's a balance of both of those. But I also want to make this really main point here is, on this, a great kind of surface level topic of it that runs much deeper is this like fruiting body mycelium debate. What's really important, and like really important to us at Multiverse, and as we're creating our own product, is we want to evolve with the industry. And I think one of the mishaps also you can look at in the wellness space is people that are so committed to their truth that they don't evolve as new science evolves. And a lot of my favorite doctors in the space had to reissue statements on books that they wrote 20 years ago with truths that were so solid to them at that time. But as research and science comes out that proves otherwise, evolve. And we're really committed to that as well. So, at the Multiverse, and what our kind of ethos is, like, let's learn everything. Let's talk to everyone. Let's support the people we think are doing it the right way, and let's evolve accordingly. And one of the interesting things about mycelium is that there are more studies being done on it in the future. So I think for everyone here, if all of a sudden a ton of research were to point a different direction, we would all evolve with that. Right now, the research points a particular way. And I think that's really important to stress, because there is so much attention in the mushroom space. It's gonna be bigger, in our opinion, than the psilocybin, bigger than cannabis ever was. The total addressable market for psilocybin psychoactive mushrooms is, globally a billion people suffer with some sort of mental health disorder. Functional mushrooms and adaptogens have so much power to help everyone in a very particular way. So this space is going to take off. And I think it's just being committed to staying up to date with all the research, continuing to do your own studies, like what Mushroom Revival is mentioning. And I just want to stress the importance of that, and just, being committed to evolving with the best knowledge that has continued to be put in our world.
Really quick, I love that you just said that, and that is, the values of a really great scientist and just person in general, of looking at the facts and not being biased, right? And someone, Jesse, actually wrote in the questions section, and I'll make it really, really quick. They asked about the production cost of, mycelium versus fruiting bodies. And as, we're both commercial mushroom farmers as a background, and we've done it for many, many years. And mycelium is incredibly cheaper to produce. Like it's a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time as well. It only takes a couple weeks at most to produce a huge biomass of mycelium, where it takes months to produce actual mushrooms. So as a business hat, putting that on, I'm like, I would love to use mycelium. Oh my God, it would save us a ton of money as a business and a ton of time, especially, sourcing ingredients and blah, blah, blah. I mean, literally it's a fraction of the price, right? And on a farming scale, it's a fraction of the time. So from a business perspective, from COGS, from just like raw profits, like I would love to use mycelium, but that's not where I'm coming from. I'm not coming from raw profits. I'm coming from actually wanting to support people's health. And I am a scientist, and I am a geek, and I read scientific papers. That's like what we do in our free time a lot of times. But like, yeah, we're keeping up to date with the science, and there's such a gap there. But so far, it's pretty crystal clear. But if it changes, we'll definitely change. But so far, it's pretty crystal clear. That being said, let's go to more of an easier topic, because we could talk about this for like the next 10 hours. But what are some popular adaptogens out there, especially in North America, that you want to talk about, you want to highlight, mushrooms and herbs that you think people should know about?
Oh my God, where to begin? I'm like, we have not a lot of time left, but I think we can hang out longer if people can. I don't know. I personally can for myself. I want to just, before we get into other adaptogens, Jesse said, so the cost for customers, about that difference with mycelium and fruiting body, the cost for customers, we don't see much of a difference there. So whether you're spending, $35 on 2 grams of myceliated oat that hasn't been extracted, or, 1.5 grams of double extracted fruiting body that's been lab tested and grown on wood, the cost is pretty much analogous on the shelf. So really it's up to, which isn't fair, it's up to the consumer. So thanks for being here and, being just curious and knowing really what you're getting. So yeah, right on. Other adaptogens, I'm like, I wonder if anyone has like an adaptogen they want to talk about. I'm like, we can go into, I'll just mention adaptogens are a spectrum as well. So like they have all these things in common, and there's more gentle adaptogens, like Alli's, like I kind of take them to like chill. So she's probably grabbing for more of the like Tulsi, holy basil, or ashwagandha, reishi, right? Some of these more gentle adaptogens. And then we have, there's a spectrum, but then there's like some more pushy, stimulating adaptogens, maybe for more like older people or people that are really debilitating exhausted, that kind of like give you a kick. So on that end, we have like our like true ginseng, but then we also have Siberian ginseng, eleuthero. We have, rhodiola is a bit more stimulating. Cordyceps kind of falls somewhere in the spectrum. But yeah, so there's this kind of, you can choose, even though they're all going to be supportive and normalizing and balancing to multiple systems of the body, primarily, our endocrine system, our nervous system, and our immune system. We can choose which adaptogens that we're reaching for based on kind of our state of where we're approaching them from.
Yeah, just to answer your question, Rachel, reishi is an amazing mushroom. Post workout, it also helps support your body in seasonal change. So that's really important. When the seasons change, our body does all sorts of stuff, and reishi is a great adaptogen for that, to help support our overall health and wellness, and to support our body's natural reaction to seasonal change. And those semi-intense activities like working out, they're a natural hug to our joints and to our overall system. So reishi is one that I personally love, and it's on that chill spectrum that Danielle was just talking about, and this is something, all adaptogens are not the same, right? So if you are an intense person, and you're on the dry spectrum, which we talked about in the last Clubhouse, is this spectrum in TCM, or traditional Chinese herbalism, and you probably don't want like ginseng or eleuthero or something like that, which is dry. It'll probably make the problem worse, right? Or you don't want ginseng, or cordyceps before bed. You probably want to grab the reishi. Although they're both adaptogens, they have very different actions in the body. So yeah, that's why I love adaptogens, is that they're a big umbrella and they all do different things. So you can go super deep in all their different nuances.
Dane, I think your question's great. I don't know enough about adaptogens. I'm a mycologist, not an herbalist whatsoever. But Danielle, how would you answer Dane's question, or Alli?
Yeah, I'm gonna just give Ivar, I don't know, I hope I'm not butchering your name, but I'm going to give you two other adaptogens first, and we'll kind of just go down the list. And I promise I'll get to your question too, Dane. But for the mental focus, focus supporting effects that you're looking for, awesome that you've already started experimenting with lion's mane. The two other plant-based adaptogens that I encourage you checking out are mucuna pruriens, which is an amazing, it's called the velvet bean, and it's actually like a seed pod, traditionally used in Ayurveda. And it contains L-dopa, which is a precursor to dopamine. And it has amazing neuroprotective effects. So you can look into, we could do like 3-hour lecture just on mucuna. So let me know if you want to go deeper, but try it for really, first and foremost, that support with focus and creativity and memory support. And then there'll also be, like all adaptogens, there's many other benefits. With mucuna, we see benefits to the stress response and to libido as well. It's kind of fun thing there. Our bodies are all connected. And then gotu kola, check out gotu kola, one of my favorite leaves. That's a plant-based adaptogen, amazing for supporting focus and memory and concentration and all these things. So you can start to stack those. We'll like dive into Dane's question, and then I'll pass the mic to Alli. But yeah, stacking adaptogens is definitely encouraged. Know that synergy takes place when we combine different whole plants with other whole plants. So we can, stack, for example, Ivar, you can stack all three of these more focus supporting adaptogens, and that effect will be enhanced. But for example, when we stack like multiple of our functional mushrooms, we see more of an immune supporting benefit, because they all share this beta glucan compound, right? So they kind of act on each other. So we can, it basically create, you can formulate, it's a whole other science of bridging, maybe a more warming or cooling herb with something that might be more stimulating or balancing. So like if you want kind of right down the middle, you could try to combine, and this is amazing combination, but like cordyceps with reishi, or like rhodiola with ashwagandha. And so you kind of can meet in the middle if you're like, I don't know where to start. So yeah, we don't see diminishing returns. We really see it's not like, and it's a really valid question, because we do see that with other, vitamins and minerals, for example, like magnesium and calcium have this interaction, or we have some things that you take together can either, or like all the omegas taken together, it's like that defeats the purpose. Versus when we combine other substances, we can actually enhance their benefit. And it's not only adaptogens with adaptogens, right? We can mix, like, we add rose hips in all of our 4 Sigmatic elixirs because they're super rich in vitamin C. And we know that vitamin C increases, and helps increase that bioavailability of many of these immune supporting compounds. So we can add other substances as well that aren't necessarily adaptogens to kind of target and focus how we want to feel their benefits in our body. Fantastic question.
Yeah, and then, I think that one of the most interesting questions that we get all the time, and I'd actually love to hear Danielle and Alex and Lyra answer this, just because we get it so frequently, is, mushrooms and adaptogens are the complete opposite of like what the healthcare system tells us, right? Like it's opposite of take an Advil and cure your pain. And what's really cool about mushrooms specifically is, they compound in your system. So if I think it was Danielle or Tara, or maybe I read this somewhere from one of you, but the idea that, you're giving people mushrooms every day so that you will actually need them so they'll actually work on the days where you need them, right? Like you'll build, you start to build and support your immune system over time, for the times where it's actually under duress, even if you're not. So it's not something you take only when you're feeling stressed or anxiety. It's things that you can take every single day to support yourself. And so much of like our kind of talk track around mushrooms, like how can we, and adaptogens, like how can we get them back into your daily routine? Like I believe humans were designed to be consuming these things, and according to all the research and a lot of the stuff we talked about and over the course of the last hour, like we're designed to be, these things work really well in our bodies and they support us, and we're designed to be consuming them. But can either of you or all three of you kind of speak to the compounding effect of like how they affect your system over time and how you would recommend people taking them?
Yeah, I mean, that is what a dietary supplement is, right? And we're not trying to cure, diagnose, treat any disease or illness, where it's really to support your everyday life, right? And to go along our daily routines, which I love how 4 Sigmatic is weaving that in. It's really a supportive quality to our everyday habits that are healthy, right? And Jesse just private messaged us asking, could they take cordyceps every day for chi? It's a concept in TCM, which is basically energy, right? And these compounds like cordycepin in cordyceps or adenosine, they work with our ATP system, and we need those compounds flowing through our bloodstream all the time, right? Probably not before sleep, but when we need them. And they're tonics, a lot of these herbs and mushrooms, so they have a tonifying effect over time. And that's it's a concept in biohacking. People talk about the 1%, 1% benefits, right? And so little benefits stack over time, so you get momentum, right? And so I was thinking about really like, what is an adaptogen, right? And I was thinking of a good analogy. And probably everyone here has tried to spread cold butter on toast, and like how frustrating that is. Like it breaks, it sucks, and it rips your bread. I mean, it sucks, right? And so imagine yourself as cold butter, right? You're not really an effective human. You're tense, you're tight, you'll rip your toast, you'll rip up everything around you, and like and it spreads, right? That occasional stress just spreads around you. But say that butter is room temperature and you spread it, you can start your day with ease, and then you're sitting in traffic you're a little more easeful. And so maybe instead of yelling at traffic and clenching your wheel, you listen to an audiobook, right? And then you get a cool tip from that audiobook, and then you get into work and someone tries to talk to you, and instead of being all like in your head and having a crap conversation because you're stressed out about the butter and the traffic, you have a great conversation. You're like, hey, I learned this great tip from my audiobook, and then you have a business presentation, right? And then you go in there, and then you're like triply as excited to go in there, and then you're confident. You're not like, oh, I just had an embarrassing conversation where it wasn't, it was awkward. I had stuck in traffic, I had this cold butter on my toast, it ripped my breakfast. And then you have a great business, and it goes on and on and on, right? And so this is the same as herbs or functional mushrooms, where it's just that 1%, right? And then it gets you just enough energy to work out. If you're in a slump and you're like, I'm not working out, it just gets you just enough to start working out. And then you're feeling more in touch with your body, and you're like, oh, it'd feel really good, some yoga, and then it's just one habit leads to another. And so, adaptogens work in this way, as any biohacking tip or trick is just this little 1% benefits, just one little, and then you build this momentum. So as much of these things as you can have every day makes a huge impact, right? And it's the same as turmeric and black pepper, right? What is the phrase? The parts are bigger than the sum. No, the sum is bigger than the parts, right? And it's the same as compounding is huge, and it's not only herbs, it's our habits as well. So hopefully that answered the question, and hopefully you like my analogy. But
I loved your analogy, Alex. And actually, our analogy that we use is, well, and everyone here probably, I mean, if you grew up anything similar to how my parents raised me, every time I would spend $5 on like a Starbucks cup of coffee, they're like, there's a book that went viral, and it's like, if you were to invest that $5 that you spend every day on your Starbucks cup of coffee, there is this like beautiful case study of how you'll be a really passive millionaire in 20 years. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you don't invest in your wellness, you'll end up paying for your illness. And there's so much research out there. A lot of my background was studying the healthcare system, which, Dane, kind of will snowball maybe into your question about the pharmaceutical industry. But so much of the research that I've done in the healthcare system is researching how much money people actually end up spending on their disease later in life because they're not investing in their wellness. And a lot of, from the corporate wellness side of things, for every dollar that corporations invest into their employees' wellness programs, they actually end up saving $6 in healthcare costs down the road. And so there's so much research like that on the back end payment of people having to support themselves financially because of disease that they accumulate because they didn't invest in their wellness and their nutrition, their food, their supplementation earlier in life. And Dane, on your question, specifically around, I can start with this. I'm curious what your guys' answer is as well. But so the short answer is yes. Like Dane's question is, do you foresee significant backlash from sort of pharmaceutical companies as these compounds become more popular? It's a bit of a controversial topic, and just like some interesting stats from the time, like for a year of my life, my job was to study the healthcare system and kind of how messed up it is. Really fascinating, because a lot of the decision making that happens in American healthcare is related to profit margin. A lot of the decisions that happen in America is related to profit margin. Same kind of conversation as we were having with mycelium earlier, but if you were to look at the most popular surgeries in the United States, they're directly correlated with profit margin. If you were to look at the most popular prescription drugs, kind of the same thing. And I think that why it's so important to invest in the research behind these compounds and these adaptogens and these functional mushrooms is so it's really, really clear for people what the benefits are. You know, Alex and Lyra and Danielle and I had chatted about this earlier, but there's, you know, there's a lot you are and are not allowed to say about mushrooms and adaptogens. And I think the more research dollars that we invest into these substances, the more education we have overall as a society on them, it won't be refutable from the pharmaceutical side of things.
I'll just chime in and say thanks, Al. And the big difference, it's important to know kind of like what we're talking about. So the vast majority of our pharmaceuticals originated, you know, as a compound that was in a whole matrix of compounds in a mushroom or in another plant. And that's like this really key difference here, right? When we're talking about, we've used this term a lot, like the real mushroom, the whole mushroom, or the plant itself. And that the, you know, key difference here is whether we're talking about a whole natural, you know, species versus an isolated constituent, right? So like aspirin being a really good common example. We all have heard of aspirin. Aspirin, you know, the key constituent in there, the compound that's making aspirin is salicylic acid, which is found in the bark of willow trees, right? So we have this, but there's all these other amazing compounds that are in the bark of willow tree as well. And we're seeing that, you know, so you can't patent a whole like being out in nature, right? We mentioned that things are going to change year to year. There's always a different range of compounds. And so that's where you can either pull something out, isolate it. And when we isolate a compound, there's more of a guaranteed repeatable effect in any different range of bodies that takes it, right? It's like directed, this is affecting this pathway, you know, no matter what that person, what their temperament is or their you know, what their constitution is. And what's so magical and unique about adaptogens, there's hundreds of different compounds that are working in synergy together. And our body recognizes that as this whole, you know, living thing. And there's a completely different way that it moves through our body, that our body's able to process it. Even if, for example, we're taking the mucuna, you know, to support cognition, a lot of times, you know, you can buy, there's a pharmaceutical L-DOPA that's used in early stages of neurodegenerative diseases. But the difference when you use it when there's that L-DOPA in the matrix of the whole, all these other phytoconstituents in the mucuna bean, our body has such a higher capacity to utilize even that main compound, but all these other compounds. And like the science is like, wait, what's going on here? Because we're so trained to isolate one specific thing and be like, this is for this. And I think part of the, you know, where we're opening our minds to is like, maybe it isn't like a pill for an ill or a compound for a result, but it's the synergy that works together and kind of looking at our body like an ecosystem again, instead of a machine, right? It's not like this part's broken, I fix it. Okay, this part might be, you know, deficient in something, so I'm going to support that. And wow, now my gut health is functioning again and I'm sleeping better, and this cascade. So just kind of drawing that distinction real quick.
So somebody asked about different resources, and we put some links in there. We put a great book, a lead researcher. If anybody else has some, we'll just put it in the chat. But I did want to, I know we're going a little over the time, but I did want to bring it a little full circle of some tips and tricks that people can utilize in their life outside of herbs and mushrooms, because it goes beyond a pill or a tincture or, you know, a cup of coffee or whatever it is. It's a whole lifestyle as well. So I'm just curious, you can go one by one of like our favorite health hacks for occasional stress. So anyone want to go first?
I can start just because I've been doing this lately. I'm a really lazy cook. I'll cook myself breakfast. Everything else after that I kind of dread. But I love to eat healthy because I feel amazing and I glow. And like, I also don't really like eating raw vegetables. Surprise. But I've been making a smoothie with just I'll put like raw beets, celery, just like all the nasty stuff I don't want to eat into a smoothie with a bunch of peaches, and it tastes amazing. And like I'm just getting like a ton of, well, you don't think it tastes amazing. You gotta like kind of cater it to your own thing. But honestly, smoothies have been a really just fast track way for me to get a whole head of kale into my diet every single day. And holy crap, everything else feels good. I'm more like prone to working out on days that I drink those smoothies. So that's just like a hack for me. Ton of smoothies, ton of maceration of otherwise very intense vegetables. Yeah, reishi, I take that every day more than any other mushroom. That's my favorite one. It's the one that got me into this whole world. Take it every night. And meditation. Those are my top three.
It's great. For me, there's so many. I mean, there's so many tools in the tool belt, but someone brought up chi, which is awesome that you know even what that is. There's a practice called qigong, and similar to tai chi, similar maybe to yoga, and this was taught to me by my teacher, and it's called just shaking it out, shaking your bones. And it looks ridiculous. I mean, if someone looked at you doing it, you look absurd. But it's one of the most effective ways for me to recenter and ground to the earth and just get in my body as quickly as possible. And you only need a couple minutes. And really what you do is you stand, shoulder width apart with your feet planted on the ground, and you pretend like you're on a trampoline and just kind of bounce. You stay mobile in your knees and you just shake your limbs, right? And you could shake it out this way, and it just brings the blood all throughout your body, and you just shake out all the tension, and you shake out all the stuff that you're holding on to, right? Like most people in this society, they're sedentary all day. They're in one position typing, and we just build all this gunk, and what we're realizing is that consciousness and our mind is not just in our brain, right? It's all throughout our body, this study of somatic. So re-entering our body is super important. So that's my hack of just shaking it out. You only need a couple minutes. If you can do 5, and an extra added bonus is to do breath of fire. So, pretend that you want to blow out a candle in front of you with your nostrils, and it's just really rapid breathing. And so it by shaking, you're moving the blood. By breathing like that, you're moving the oxygen all around. And for me, it's like a reset button for my body. So that's my hack. I hope that at least one person tries it when they get off, because it really does work.
I'll go next, and then I'll hand it over to Danielle. I loved that, and I think what's really funny is, especially over the last 12 months, like what the world has shown us is you can build an entire life just doing this. Like you can build an entire business. You can literally spend your entire life, like that is now acceptable in today's society, which is insane. Movement is so good for you, and it sounds obvious because I think a lot of people get into the wellness space like first through movement and then through nutrition, and then they get into like all this other really nerdy stuff that we've all been talking about for the last hour and a half. But it's so important. When I'm stressed, I need to walk and I need to move my body and just like get my blood flow going. I also think, on a total separate like mental health note, like there is very few things in life that a good conversation with the right person cannot fix. And laughter, I think that a lot of people take themselves way too seriously, myself included. And when I'm stressed, it's like I'm just thinking about myself, and I'm like the center of my own world and perspective, and like having conversations with people. For me, I have like kind of like life accountability partners and like ego accountability partners that I check in with when I'm not feeling 100%, and just having that perspective check, having quotes that remind you of like how ridiculous your problems are in the scheme of things. If you're lucky enough to be joining this webinar, it means you have access to the internet, which is like still a novel thing for like, you know, some people in the world. So I feel like, you know, just gratitude. And then on just a quick note on the diet thing as well is it's so important to me what I put in my body. I'm very balanced with, you know, making sure that I'm getting enough good stuff. I am not, you know, too nuts. I still enjoy like the delicacies and like unhealthy stuff sometimes, but one of the best quotes I ever heard to remind me why it's so important to put good things in your body is if you give a healthy diet, plant-based diet to, they did this really cool study with like really aggressive prisoners, and it reduces their aggression levels like almost 80%. That's how important diet is. And if you think about that, most people in the world are eating really shitty processed foods. The amount of chemicals that are allowed into the American healthcare system, or, you know, just like American food, specifically America. If you were to sell a McDonald's hamburger in Australia from an American list of ingredients, you'd be a felon. That's how bad the ingredients are over here from the same menu item. So just being really cognizant of like getting back to human and putting clean things into your body, because it really changes your personality. Mm-hmm. Those would be my top.
Those are amazing. And I'm just loving, I was like, everyone put in your own ways, because there's so many ways, right? It's like what works for us might not work for you. So find your own way. I love that we all mentioned free things like shaking, laughing, gratitude. Alex mentioned this, but breathing. I just finished the most incredible book, Breath. If you guys have not read it, everyone go read this, by James Nestor. Such an incredible tool. You know, talk about like we eat 3 times a day, we breathe every moment of the day. And there's such a powerhouse of opportunity to relax our entire nervous system, right? Just through lengthening our exhales and the whole range. He says there's as many ways to breathe as there are foods to eat, right? Like that's crazy. We think it's this autonomic thing, and yet we have so much control in our breath. So lots of different types of breath work out there. And yeah, as Alli was mentioning, what we're putting in our body, you know, we talk about these beneficial compounds in the mushrooms, the adaptogens, like there's beneficial compounds in most of our foods, or, you know, we're either feeding something positive or we're feeding something negative. So if I were to distill it, the number one nutrient deficiency in the American diet is magnesium. Magnesium is our cellular relaxer. Literally, I think about, we're so stressed. We're like that cold butter, or I'll change it to cold ghee because I can't eat butter. But we're so stressed, and yeah, to be able to give our systems the actual mineral that is allowing us to unwind. So Epsom salt baths or adding magnesium in is so important. So breath work and mag.
I thank you so much for everyone putting their tips. And I love how even people are responding to each other in the chat and asking questions about their tips. So that's really awesome. And obviously this is about adaptogens. This is about functional mushrooms. So, you know, we have 3 incredible companies up here that have incredible products. I mean, highest quality that you can get, and Alli's representing a bunch of different companies out there, so many more than 3. But you know, we have our own coupon code for people that are tuning in. Do you want to put it in the chat?
Yes, it is adaptogen 15 for Mushroom Revival, and then Alli, looks like you have adaptogens plural 10 for Multiverse.
And then I've been seeing a bunch of ads from Sigmatic. So I don't know if you want to talk about the birthday celebration going on.
Yeah, it's our 9-year birthday, which is really exciting. And so we're doing a week-long birthday sale. So all of our products are between 23 and 50% off. So definitely, this is like the best time of the year to head over to foursigmatic.com and get some awesome deals on plant-based proteins and mushroom coffee and mushroom cacaos and all sorts of goodies.
Cool. Awesome. And thanks everyone for joining. Dane, thank you so much for that comment. And please, you know, I can speak for ourselves. Please reach out for any questions that you have. Much love, everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And same with Alex and Lyra and Danielle, I'm sure as well. If you want to chat more, please reach out to me. You can directly find me on Instagram. I'll throw my Instagram handle in there too. I love chatting about this stuff. And please stay in touch. Let's do another one of these. This is great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Stay tuned, everyone.
And this is homework for everyone out there. If you learn something really, really cool, whether it's a tip, an herb, whatever it is, tell a friend or a family member or, you know, your Uber Eats delivery guy or whatever. Tell someone to keep this momentum going of how cool herbs and mushrooms are. So
you gotta be that hypeful tip
exactly
of the mycelium.
Keep it spreading. Cool, guys. Thanks for spending another 25 minutes with us. Much love for everyone out there. Check out For Sigmatic, check out Multiverse, check out Mushroom Revival. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Much love.
Much love.
Bye, guys.